Review of Mark 13. The return of Jesus the Messiah depends on Israel nationally. When Jesus was rejected by the Jewish leaders on behalf of the nation as a whole in Matthew 12 and Mark 3, the offer of the literal earthly kingdom was retracted from that generation of Israel. However, Jesus did promise that the kingdom would be reoffered to a future generation of Jews. The Olivet Discourse deals with Jesus functioning in his third office. Jesus holds 3 offices, one at a time, each in turn. First, at his first coming, he was a prophet, receiving direct revelation from God, proclaiming God's will to his own generation, predicting future events both near and far. His second office, which is the one he currently holds, is high priest. At his ascension, he went from being a prophet to high priest. He is our high priest in heaven, interceding for us believers now. At his second coming, his office will change again. He will be king of the Jews and of the whole world. The Olivet Discourse is dealing with this office where Jesus is functioning in his third office as king. The date is Tuesday, April 4th, 30 AD, the 12th of Nisan. Nisan being the Babylonian name they adopted after the captivity. The name for this month used before this period of Israel's history is Aviv or Abib. Mark 13, 1 and 2. As they were going out of the temple, one of Jesus' disciples commented about the stones and buildings. Jesus used this opportunity to teach about the precondition for his second coming by saying, "Not one stone will be left upon another." The Herodian blocks averaged to be about 10 to 12 feet in length and weighed around 8 to 10 tons, with many up to 400 tons. The second temple was originally built by Zerubbabel when he led the return from Babylon around 536 BC. Herod began restoring and expanding the temple in 20 BC. The work on the compound, outer courts, and structures was not completed until AD 64. Jesus prophesied regarding these stones was literally fulfilled in AD 70 with the destruction of Jerusalem, the city, and the temple. In verse 3, Peter, James, John, and Andrew questioned Jesus privately regarding these things while they were sitting on the Mount of Olives opposite the temple. The first question was, "When will these things be?" referring to the stones being torn down, the destruction of the temple and Jerusalem. And the second question being, what will be the sign when these things are going to be fulfilled? In Matthew 24:3, we learn more details about the question referring to when Jesus will return, or when the second coming will occur, and when the end of the age will be. In Jewish eschatology, they believed in 2 ages, this present age and the age to come, namely the Messianic age or kingdom. They didn't understand the program of death and resurrection or the program of Jesus coming twice. They expected that the Messianic age would begin at that current Passover. Jesus does not answer their question in the order that they were asked, but rather based on what would actually occur. Jesus answered the third question first, so the sign of the end of the age. In Mark 13, 5 to 7, Jesus described things that will occur, but things that are not necessarily signs of the end of the age. The first general characteristic of this age is the rise of false messiahs like Simon Bar Kokhba, 132 to 135 AD, the leader of the second Jewish revolt against Rome. Shabbatai Tzvi, born 1626 in Smyrna, or Turkey today. Jacob Frank of Poland, 1726 to 1791. And Menachem Schneerson, 1902 to 1994. The second general characteristic of this age, again not necessarily a sign of the last days, is hearing of wars and rumors of local wars. These are the characteristics of the entire church age, not signs of the last days. In contrast to those local wars, in verse 8, Jesus added that nation shall rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and that these things are the beginning of travail or birth pangs, a series of contractions before the birth of the new messianic kingdom or age. This is a rabbinic idiom indicating the beginning of the last days, not war in and of itself, but the scope of the war, meaning the whole world. World War I and World War II marked the beginning of the last days. They affected the Jewish people in Israel, with World War I being the catalyst for a massive growth of the Zionist movement, culminating in the reestablishment of the State of Israel in 1948, shortly after World War II and the Holocaust. Next, in Mark 13, 9 to 13, and Luke 21, 12 to 19, Jesus tells them a near prophecy. What will happen to them in the near future? This is still part of the answer to the question of what will be the sign of the end of the age. Certain things would happen to the disciples for Christ's sake. They would be rejected and persecuted, delivered up to the councils, beaten in synagogues, brought before rulers and kings, rejected by family, hated by all, and put to death. But all this provides opportunities to preach and share their testimonies. They would have success because the Holy Spirit would give them the words/wisdom regarding what to say. Mark 13, 14 to 23 is dealing with Jews during the tribulation, also mentioned in Matthew 24, 9 to 14, who endure to the end. This passage is not talking about us, the church, because we will have been removed, raptured, before this time even began. Those alive at that time, in the middle of the tribulation, when they see the abomination of desolation in the temple that was spoken of by Daniel, are told they are to flee to the mountains. This tribulation period of time is described as never been seen since the beginning of creation, nor shall ever be again. We know this is referring to the Jewish believers because they are the elect whom God chose. Matthew 24:12 and 2 Thessalonians 2, 6 and 7 says, sin will increase, it will multiply, because the restraint of the man of lawlessness has been removed. The second half of the tribulation will be characterized by unparalleled anti-Semitism. Attempts will be made to draw out the Jews, to trick them to come out of hiding, using signs and wonders to deceive them. The abomination of desolation, the Antichrist, or the man of lawlessness, setting himself up in the temple of God, declaring himself to be God, 2 Thessalonians 2, 3 and 4, and Matthew 24:15, Revelation 13, 11 to 15 says the false prophet makes an image of the Antichrist and sets it up in the Holy of Holies of the Jewish temple. With AI, artificial intelligence, it's not hard to imagine this happening now. Mark 3, 24 to 26 deals with the disciples' second question. What is the sign that the second coming is about to occur? We read that in those days the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars of heaven will fall, and the powers in heaven will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. Mark 13:27 talks about sending his angels to gather together his elect from the farthest part of the earth to the farthest part of heaven after the second coming. The background to this verse is found in Deuteronomy 30 verses 4 and 5, when God prophesied about bringing back Israel from captivity and has compassion on them, gathering them from all the nations where the Lord scattered them. There is two regatherings talked about in the Bible, one in unbelief in preparation for judgment, which is a tribulation, and this one, which is regathering in faith or belief, in preparation for the blessing of the literal earthly kingdom. There is talk about two localities, farthest part of the earth and the farthest part of heaven, explaining both the living Israel who survived the tribulation on earth and the Old Testament saints, so Adam and his seed will receive the land, so the resurrected Israel mentioned in Genesis 35, 9 to 15, to enjoy the Messianic kingdom together. Next, Jesus talks about the parable from the fig tree. When you see the fig tree and other trees coming into leaf, you know that summer is coming. When you see the abomination of desolation, you know that Jesus will soon return in 1260 days, and that generation who sees the abomination of desolation will still be alive when Jesus, Messiah, returns. Satan's program of Jewish destruction is doomed to failure. Daniel 9, 25 to 27, and chapter 12 says that the period of time from the abomination of desolation to the second coming will be exactly 1260 days. The last part of Mark, verses 33 to 37, is talking about being watchful, diligent, and ready. The way to be diligent and ready is to be saved or to have obtained salvation. The unbeliever is characterized by failing to watch and be ready. We are to keep on watching and waiting for his return, laboring, industrious while waiting. The parable of the talents in Matthew 25, 14 to 30 is a good illustration of this, along with the parable of the 10 virgins. So that's my review of Mark 13. May the Lord bless you and have a good week.